So Hell Let Loose had the upcoming Mortain map on the PTE over the weekend for all of us to try. And from what I understand, this will be the first map for Hell Let Loose that Expression Games has developed, the rest being from the former studio Black Matter. So let's dive into what works, what doesn't, and then let's talk about some specific points on the map. But if you're clicking on this video just to find out if I think the new map is any good, the answer is yes. This map is very fun. As I mentioned, this is the first map for Hell Let Loose from Expression Games, and it really shows. It plays and looks very differently from all the other maps. Between the foliage and the elevation changes, it seems to funnel players straight into the action. When I was playing, the most full a server ever got was 60-ish, but it felt like 200 people playing at times with how chaotic it got. The lush greenness of the map is really easy on the eyes, giving it almost a different identity than all the other forest maps we have. Also, whatever they did to the grass on this map is fantastic. I didn't really have any render issues with it, and it looked like the grass that was in Hell Let Loose years ago. You know, when you search images for Hell Let Loose from like 2019 and 2020 and you see how good the grass looks, yeah, we got grass like that again. In fact, the only render issues I saw was trees not rendering in from about 500 meters away. Like when you're looking up at a point on high ground and you could see the buildings but not the trees around it, that kind of issue. So yeah, that's going to be annoying. But honestly, there's not too many of those long distance sight lines on this map. But if you're building an AT gun or in a tank trying to shell a point, it's going to take some work to dial those shots in through the trees that you can't see. But the big thing about the brush on this map is there is an insane amount of bushes that the player can enter. This is going to be something that Hell Let Loose players are going to have to adapt to, as you're pretty much going to have to clear out every bush you come across, because it is very easy to sit inside one of these things and just wait for players to run at you, and they are most likely not going to see you in there. So the west side of the map is mostly made up of the town of Mortain, with a mixture of destroyed ruins, buildings, and a bunch of yards and gardens to fight through, all surrounding a massive church. The points in this area have potential for some awesome offensive matches. The layout of everything is pretty good. However, there are a couple minor issues really holding this part of the map back. The biggest one is you can't enter most of the buildings, including this giant church. It just makes it a little awkward, and the house-to-house combat is really missing something here. So all these buildings, you kind of have to walk around like they're giant blocks, just used as cover. And even the church is blocked off, which makes it really weird because this is just a giant square in the middle of the map that you have to walk all the way around. And I don't think I'd really be feeling this way, but every large church on every other Hell Let Loose map you can enter, so I feel like you should be able to do the same here. The other minor issue is that there's a huge contrast between the ruined buildings feeling dirty and war-torn, being right next to intact buildings being very clean and untouched. I'm not saying either of these things look bad, it's just very weird to have them right next to each other and gives off a different vibe. So it really stands out. You'll have all this rubble next to a bright, clean street, and it just looks a little odd. But with all that said, I think the layout of the town is fantastic. It's on a slight elevation, so at times you're fighting uphill. Gardens and yards and all these little alleyways make for some great combat scenarios. So if they just open up some buildings and really kind of blend the war-tornness with these untouched buildings together, and really kind of make these buildings feel a little more lived in, a little more beat up, I think this is going to be a really cool part of the map and give some of the best urban combat we have in the game. The rest of the map is a mix of fields, farms, and hedgerows with some small villages and camps mixed in. And they've done a really good job of making it feel like there's no part of the map that feels empty. And when there was no building or camp or village or whatever, the elevation changes across the map kept things feeling fun and fresh. And when you mix these elevation changes with all the hedgerows, the tons of bushes for soft cover, and it honestly plays like no other Hell Let Loose map. Again, the biggest complaint I have is most of these villages are made up of buildings that you can't enter. So really when you come across them, they're just large blocks used for cover, and it feels weird. But again, I can't stress how many different parts of this map feel different. The strong points, all these little hot spots. It feels like there's a lot of story being told here in a way. So I have to give them props for that. It feels good. So I feel like it's important to talk about the three middle points of the map, because these are always the most crucial. They're always the points you're fighting for in warfare. They're the points you use for seeding. Middle points are really what makes a map fun, because these are the ones you want to be fighting over. So let's talk about the one at the very top, Hill 314. It's basically a trench system on top of a hill with a small camp built around it, and this point gave me old Hurtgen Forest vibes and is going to be really fun to fight over. There's loads of good spots for garrisons and OPs to be placed, and it seems like both sides have an even amount of trees and cover approaching the trenches going uphill. And then once you get in the trenches, it was really a dogfight to hold. And despite this point being at a higher elevation, really with all the trees, it makes it hard to see infantry coming at you a long ways away. They get right up in your face before you know it. The same goes with tanks and vehicles. They seem to just kind of appear out of nowhere really quickly. But once you get inside the strong point, it is really hard to hold unless you're constantly fighting over those trenches. Up next, we have kind of the star of the show, the Petite Chappelle St. Michael. This is that church you're seeing all the imagery, that little chapel. This is right in the middle of the map. It stands on the highest point of the map, overlooking everything. It becomes complete chaos when this is the middle point of your session, and I mean that in the best way. When I played this point, it was constantly flipping between sides, with everyone having to rebuild garrisons constantly. And again, the map does a good job of funneling teams straight up to each other onto this chapel, and the next thing you know, you're 5 meters away from the enemy. It's so much fun and feels so different than any other strong point in the whole game. And the verticality here is something special, especially when you're the Germans and you're playing from that east side. You have to basically climb a mountain at some points and go up these windy little paths. And sometimes you find yourself looking straight up in the air to make sure no US troops are pointing their guns over the edge at you. It is really cool. My only complaint is, you've heard me say it a million times already, is you can't enter the chapel. It's not that big, but I feel like it'd be really helpful for teams that want to defend this point. And it does feel a little awkward when it's just this giant block that you're leaning around. There's not a lot of cover on this point. So when arty is raining down, when tanks are shooting at from across the map, opening it up will do a lot for the team trying to hold it. So hopefully that happens when this map releases. And at the bottom of the map, we have US Roadblock. This is probably the weakest of the 3 midpoints, so it's really just an intersection with some debris as cover. The name also doesn't lie, because it feels like the US can get there quicker at the start of the match, as the Germans are forced to fight slightly uphill through some hedgerows as the US can get straight for cover. Regardless, it's still a fun point. It just doesn't have that same uniqueness as the other 2 midpoints. Also, there appears to be US supply trucks here that are map assets, but they're just looking the same as the US trucks that are spawned, so expect a lot of AT and tanks to shoot these and be really confused about it. But yeah, it's a cool point. It just doesn't play as well as the other 2 in my opinion. But overall, I think it's safe to say you can be excited for this map, and I think it's going to wind up in a lot of rotations. It plays and looks so differently from other maps, and it really gives me some hope for the future of this game, especially with last year being so rough for it. But yeah, if you were able to try Mortain in the PT, let me know what you thought about it, what you changed, what you liked about it, what you didn't. If you didn't get to try it, well, hopefully we get another chance in the future here, because this map honestly can't come soon enough. We haven't had a new map like this in forever. But that's it from me. Thank you for watching. Thank you for everything you do. I'll see you on the front line.